Do you think that the markets are tightening now, even with such low unemployment, or do you think we're going to have an ongoing labor shortage that we've been experiencing?
So it depends where you're looking. So in the lower end of the labor market, people who are non-college educated doing services, right? Food service, cleaning, engineering, security, something very. There remains wage pressure.
Right.
Labor markets are tight. Wages have risen a lot. They're not rising more. So I don't think it's the same kind of rate of change it was back in 2022, but they've stabilized at a higher level, and they've grown much more than significantly more than inflation has.
Welcome to Paychex THRIVE, a business podcast where you'll hear timely insights to help you navigate marketplace dynamics and propel your business forward. Here's your host, Gene Marks.
Hey everybody, it's Gene Marks and welcome back again to another episode of the Paychex THRIVE podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. And by the way, if you're looking for any advice or help, tips to run your business, you'd like some links to our prior podcasts and other content, sign up for our Paychex newsletter. If you go to paychex.com/thrive, you'll be able to get lots of great information to help you run your business. Now to the interview and to the podcast. I have the honor of speaking to David Otter. David is a Ford Professor of Economics at MIT. He specializes in labor economics, macroeconomics, political economy, public economies. We have a lot to talk about as far as the labor market is concerned. So David, first of all, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for inviting me, Gene. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, glad to hear you. So first of all, tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you become a professor at MIT? Tell us our audience about your background.
Sure. I actually had, before I went into, did a PhD, I spent a number of years doing computer skills education for poor kids and adults in San Francisco, an organization that was a nonprofit. I did similar volunteer work in South Africa. And prior to that, I had studied psychology and also kind of concentration in computer science. I was a sort of self-taught computer geek. So my research sort of brings together my, direct engagement with individuals in their careers and their work and opportunities available, especially to, people without college degrees, people who are in the lower end of the labor market, unfortunately, and how that interacts a lot with technology and changes in, what tools are available, what skills are in demand. And even we're also worked a bunch on globalization and how trade has also affected, employment and skill demands. Fantastic.
How long have you been teaching at MIT?
I've actually been here since 1999. This is my first academic job.
Wow, that's crazy.
And it's a fabulous place. I've been incredibly fortunate. My PhD is not even in economics; it's in public policy. I sort of fell backwards into this career. I'm one of the luckiest people in the profession.
Yeah, it's a great job. It really is. I have a really good friend who I play squash with, and he's a professor of he actually runs the classics department at Penn. I live in Philadelphia, and so sometimes I visit him in his office, and I'm like, man, you work really hard to get to that level, as you know, and I'm sure you have. But it's just a beautiful environment to be in, and the academic environment's wonderful, and the kids.
It's great. Yeah, the students are fabulous. My colleagues are fabulous. It's an incredibly interesting thing to do, and the world is constantly changing in super interesting ways, and we're in a transitional moment in many ways in technology, in demographics, in trade, in our political economy. So much is changing. It's an exciting time to be trying to understand what's going on.
Let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, obviously, you do speak a lot about technology and its impact on the labor markets. Obviously, AI is our big, is the big topic of discussion. I write about 7 times a month for Forbes, and I cover technology for Forbes, mostly for small and mid-sized businesses. And I've been writing almost exclusively about AI. So let me ask you about what you think the impact of AI in general. We're in a stage of generative AI. We're quickly moving towards AGI. That's artificial general intelligence. Sam Altman just said, in a recent interview, that he thinks it's by the end of the decade. NVIDIA's CEO thinks it's within the next 5 years. So that's going to have huge effects on labor markets and what jobs are. Tell me a little bit about the future. What kind of effects do you think AI is going to have on labor?
Sure. So I'm going to leave the question of AGI aside. Okay. I'm a little more skeptical now. Of course, they're probably more qualified to hold their opinions than I do, but I'm going to stick with mine.
Fair enough.
So let me say, how is artificial intelligence different from the technologies that precedes it. I think it's useful to make the contrast. So, what we're going to call rules-based traditional computing, follows rules and procedures to execute programs, right? For something to be programmed, you need to know all the steps, because the machine, it's not going to improvise, it's not going to problem solve, it's not going to have a new idea. It's just going to do what you told it to. And so that's a very powerful idea, very powerful technology, but it runs into a limitation, which I call Polanyi's paradox, which is the philosopher Michael Polanyi said, we know more than we can tell. There are many, many things that we do. We don't know how we do them, like how to ride a bicycle, or how to tell a funny joke, or how to have a hypothesis. And for that reason, we've been unable to program them because they lean on tacit knowledge that we understand but don't articulate, don't know how to articulate. What AI does is it is very good at absorbing and applying tacit knowledge. It can learn from a whole bunch of unstructured cases and data. You can say, here's pictures of this thing. Now identify more of the thing without ever specifying what the thing is, right? What makes it a thing? What makes it something, a bicycle or a chair?
Sure.
So so in some ways it's kind of the inverse of traditional computing. Traditional computing is all about rules and procedures. AI, right? In a world historical irony, is not reliable with facts and numbers, right? Who would think a computer technology that's not reliable with facts and numbers? It sounds like a joke, right?
In fact, AI itself is, it's known, I'm an accountant, it's known to be pretty bad with accounting right now.
Sure. Absolutely. So what is it actually good for? Well, it's good for, it's good for many things, but let me sort of say one thing that for which it is really good is decision support, is enabling people to make decisions with messy problems. And most of us deal with messy problems all the time, as professionals do. And by I say professional, I could mean a doctor, I could mean a lawyer, but I could also mean a contractor, an electrician, a plumber, a pilot, right? You have a kind of high stakes one-off situation, right? How do I care for this patient? Or how do I architect this building? Or how do I remodel this house, right? And you have a lot of formal knowledge, rules and procedures, and you have a lot of examples that you've experienced. And you have to reason from that formal body of work and that set of experiences to what decision do I make right now?
Sure.
And there's no right answer, but there's lots of wrong answers, and it matters, right? There's often a life and death decision, or, it's not a question of will the building stand? That's an engineering calculation, but will anyone want to live in it?
Yep.
Right? That requires. And so AI is really good at supporting that type of decision making, right? It can look like, for example, AI is now used in radiology, right? There is no set of rules for looking at a scan and saying what is likely to be cancer versus unlikely to be cancer. It's all a lot of judgment from examples.
Yeah.
And AI really excels at that. Now, we can talk about whether AI and people work together well in that setting. They actually don't at the moment. But I think as it evolves, it's going to enable, or if we use it right, let me say, AI is not an autonomous actor in this world, right? The future, as my friend Josh Cohen, formerly my colleague at MIT, now at Apple University, says, the future is not a prediction problem, it's a design problem.
Right.
So if we use it well, it will enable more people to do valuable decision-making work with support from better tools. And that would be true in, accounting, that would be true in design, that would be true in healthcare, that would be true in engineering, that would be true in construction, that would be true in skilled repair. Right. So lots and lots of ways it can support decision making. And it's different from traditional computing, where traditional computing gives you the inputs. It says, here's the number, here's the calculation, right? Now you decide what to do. Sure. Right. This can help you with those decisions. It can help guide. It can provide guidance, like what to look at, what to think about, and guardrails of don't do that. Don't prescribe these two drugs together, et cetera.
As a professor, how do you feel about AI in the classroom? How do you feel about your students using ChatGPT to do their work?
Yeah, so it's, I haven't encountered this challenge much yet because the type of problem sets I assign are not very AI amenable at the moment. People are going to be using AI in the future, and I want them to be good at it.
Right. My
concern is if it stands in the way of them learning skills that they need to be able to master themselves.
Okay.
Right. So, I don't worry about students using a calculator to do math. However, if they didn't understand that, 10 times 10 is not a billion, that would be a problem. Okay. Right. So, and it's difficult to figure out what is the foundational set of skills you need to know to operate in a sophisticated environment where you have powerful tools. There have been terrible airplane crashes caused by people flying who are inexpert when they don't have autopilot.
Sure.
Right. So
sure.
I worry about that. So I think AI is going to help people be more effective in writing, in presentation, in software. On the other hand, if they don't know how to express themselves without a machine, or think what visually, how to communicate, I worry about that. So I don't think we know the right balance yet.
Right. But there will be a balance. Is there do you feel that AI is going to cause all of us, both, in our professional and personal lives, to reevaluate the skills that we really need to know? I mean, if you and I were driving a car in the 1920s, we would need to have mechanical skills because cars broke down all the time, and we would need, it's just natural. Nowadays, I don't know how you are, but I don't even know how a car works. Generally I do, but I break down on the side of the road, which rarely happens. I'm lost and would need a mechanic. Is that the same thing with AI? I mean, won't it, you give the example of the pilot. I get it that a pilot needs to know how to ride a plane, but all the passengers that are in the plane, we don't need to know how a plane works, right? So will that cause all of us as employers and as workers to readdress the kind of skills that we really need to know?
Absolutely. There definitely will be, right? So right now, to do software development, you need a lot of formal understanding.
Yeah.
In the future, I think there'll be a lot of software you can develop, by basically speaking to a machine and telling what you want it to do. And it will, and then you won't need it. No one will think it's crazy to develop software without understanding programming language. It's just like no one thinks you need to understand how to drive a manual transmission to drive a modern American car, right?
Exactly.
You don't have to. But I do think what people need to bring is they need to bring judgment. And this is where it gets tricky, right? Because, when you use a powerful tool, right, with great power comes great responsibility. You can do things very wrong, very fast. And if you totally rely on the tool, that's not a good idea because these tools are they make mistakes, really significant mistakes. And it's actually a skill to learn how to interact with that tool. Just like if you collaborate with a colleague on something, right? You sort of know their strengths and weaknesses. And when they say something, you evaluate, well, is that right? Is that wrong? Do I trust you? Do I trust myself? How do we resolve this? Well, AI is a little bit like that. It's opaque. It has opinions. But, so my colleagues, Nikhil Agarwal and Tobias Sauls, among other authors, did an experiment with AI in radiology. And there are lots of scan reading, X-ray reading software now, like the one they studied is called Chexpert, Chest Expert. And it's pretty good. With just the scan alone, it's as good as 6 out of 10 radiologists. So you might think, now I should say radiologists also have a lot of contextual information. It's not just the scan alone.
Sure.
But you might think, well, therefore, if it's pretty good, then doctors and radiologists and software, would be even better. But at the moment, radiologists do worse with the software than they do on their own.
Right.
And the reason is because they don't know how to use it well. So more specifically, the software has uncertainty and it tells you how confident it is in a scan. Doctors also have uncertainty. These are very correlated. In general, when the software is uncertain, the doctor's uncertain. When the software is confident, the doctor's confident. Well, what tends to happen is when the software is uncertain, the doctor's uncertain, the doctor defers to the software.
Yeah.
When the doctor's confident and the software is confident, the doctor overrides the software.
Right.
Turns out neither is a good idea.
Right.
When the software is uncertain, you probably have more information. You probably ought to go with your gut. When it's very confident and you're very confident and you disagree, you should ask yourself why you think you're right. And so at the moment, doctors are actually making worse decisions with the help of this tool. Now, that's fixable, but it requires actual training and practice and expertise in how to work with this tool. And doctors in general are not being given a score. When you give your diagnosis, the software doesn't say, wrong, the correct answer was, right? So it's very difficult for doctors to learn that. So we need to be careful about just sort of throwing sophisticated tools into the mix and assuming we'll get good results.
Do you think we're talking about AI too early? I mean, I'm working on a piece right now for Forbes, and I have to say, I want to write a piece about AI in manufacturing. Okay. And David, I have to tell you, every article that I read about AI in manufacturing, it's all about what's coming. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like it can do this,
Yeah.
it's going to do this, it's going to do that, but nothing in the real world, unless you're talking about the BMWs and the Amazons and the very largest corporate companies out there that are spending millions on trying their best to develop this stuff, you know? And do you think that are we too premature with this technology?
I think this is a well-known paradox that in the short run, people overestimate the significance of a technology. In the long run, they underestimate it.
Yeah.
And so, yes, at the moment, the impacts are limited. The potential is very high. And there are some places where it's being used at scale all the time. It's actually being used at scale in healthcare. It's being used at scale in customer service, in financial decision making. But in a lot of other places, people are still just beginning to figure it out. But it will require a lot of experimentation to figure out how to use it well. So it's appropriate for organizations to be investing in saying, hey, how do we use this? What works for us? Right. In the long run, you're really going to want to use this tool, but don't expect it to work miracles for you. How to even figure out how to integrate it into your workflow is a very difficult problem. I'm struggling with this all the time. Like, when am I using this tool too much? Am I not using it enough? Right. How do I use it? When it's actually useful to me?
Right. I feel like it's added like an extra layer of stress into our lives. Like we should be doing something with this, that because we don't want to miss the boat.
Totally. But remember,
I've been telling my clients to, they got to interview their software providers, whether it's Microsoft or Google or their accounting provider, their CRM provider, find out what they're rolling out, with AI and figuring out where, gives you the most ROI.
Totally.
Maybe lean into that. But it's still pretty early days.
Very early days. Yeah. Yeah. No, we are basically, it's at this point, it's just untapped potential. And usually, most people think about new technology in terms of what does it automate? What can it do for me that I used to do for myself?
Yep.
But most technologies are at their most valuable when they allow you to do something you couldn't do before.
Right.
So an airplane is valuable because we couldn't fly without an airplane, not because it automated the way we used to fly.
Right.
Electrification, didn't just, replace steam engines in factories. It changed the way factories were organized to have much more precise tools at every workstation. It took a long time to figure that out, but that's where the big gains came from.
So you're, as a labor economist, when you talk to some people that are the most optimistic about AI, they look at it as something that is going to potentially create trillions, hundreds of trillions of dollars of wealth and value globally. It will do things like, fly planes on their own and drive trains and drive cars and take away so much stuff that people are doing right now, that will be done so much more efficiently that will create a lot of wealth and value for a lot of people that the world will share it. That's the one side. Then you see the other extreme where a lot of economists are like, this is going to, Goldman Sachs came out with a study. It was like last summer, it was going to eliminate 15 to 18% of jobs worldwide, which was a giant number.
That's
as a labor
number.
economist, do you, I'm kind of curious which direction you lean. Do you think that over the long term, this will be good for labor markets, or do you think that this will create, negative disruption in the labor markets?
So first, let me say this is a highly contentious topic, and people in my field have very different views. So whatever I say will not be representative of anyone's views except my own.
I just want your opinion.
It's certainly going to create disruption, no question. It'll strand certain forms of expertise and skills that will no longer have market value because they can be done, automatically. I don't think we're going to run out of work at all. In fact, we're in a demographic crunch, and unless we dramatically liberalize our immigration policies, which I think we should do, but I don't think we will do, we're going to be running out of workers before we run out of jobs.
Yeah.
So the question is not whether we'll have jobs, but whether they are expert jobs that pay well, or whether they're generic jobs doing residual tasks that machines can't do, right? So a world in which everyone is waiting tables and washing dishes because we haven't figured out how to get robots to do that yet is not as good a world as one in which everyone is doing healthcare and air traffic control.
Right.
Right. And the difference is expertise. Human labor is, everyone can, not everyone, most people can do table waiting and dishwashing with little training or certification, which means it won't pay well.
Right.
Expert work is work that creates valuable products or services and that not everyone knows how to do. And so we have a major stake in the value of labor expertise, and a world in which all the, labor, all the value is coming from machines, right? That's a very difficult world to govern. You have what economists call resource curse. It's like all the money's coming from one place, a hole in the ground. If it's oil, that's very appropriable. It allows, a government or bad actor to essentially, get a stranglehold on that and command the resources for him or herself and not really tend to share them. And that's what's happened throughout most of history. So I believe democratic societies are strongly dependent upon well-functioning labor markets in which labor is valuable. Right now, about 60% of all national income goes to labor.
Yeah.
And you might think, in rich countries that have so many machines, so much capital, that would be a small share. It's actually larger.
Yeah.
So the labor share in the US is like 60%. In Northern Africa, it's like 40%, right? So as we've advanced, we've managed to make human skills more valuable.
Yes.
And that is really foundational to democracy. So I do not look forward to a future. I don't think we're going to get to one, but I don't want one in which all the work is done by machines and people are just, waiting for their UBI checks, right? I think the scenario people have in mind is, WALL-E, where fat people sitting on armchairs, drinking big gulps and watching holographic TV. I think that's the good scenario. It's not even the likely one. The more likely one is like Mad Max Fury Road, where you replace the word gasoline with compute, and everyone fights to the death over it. So we don't. But again, so sorry. That's a kind of a rant. But let me say,
that's good. It's good.
The goal of technology should be to enable new capabilities, right? Not simply to automate, right? If you were automated all of ancient Greece,
right,
it wouldn't be modern America. It would just be ancient Greece without horses, right? It wouldn't have penicillin. It wouldn't have electrification, wouldn't have telecommunications, it wouldn't have flight, wouldn't have indoor plumbing, right? Most of the ways that technology has dramatically improved our lives is by creating new things that we can do.
Agreed. And, when you look at all the jobs that existed 100 years ago, 200 years ago that don't exist now, horse and buggy drivers, blacksmiths, people that, tapped on windows to wake people up in the morning before they invented alarm clocks.
That's right.
People evolved. And my other sustaining thing about the humans wanting to be busy is, when the tax code was first released, it was 2 pages, and now it's like a billion. Like people will find something to do regardless of the technology.
Well, a lot of the work that we have right now is new work. So I have a recent paper with colleagues Caroline Chin, Anna Solomons, and Brian Segmiller that shows that about 60% of the work that people do in 2020 didn't exist in 1940.
Yeah.
And a lot of that work requires new expertise, right? We didn't have pediatric oncologists. We didn't have wind turbine technicians. We didn't have, remote vehicle pilots. We also didn't have, behavioral therapists. We didn't have we had some dance instructors, but many services, right, dedicated to the elderly, to the young. And so a lot of what we do as we evolve is we create new things that require human expertise, that are valuable, and that, makes for good jobs.
Good. I agree. Okay. Let me pivot a little bit because we've got about 10 minutes left. And I have more questions than we're going to have time for, but I got to pick what I want to ask you about. I'll tell you what's been on my mind now because I'm thinking of writing a piece of this for the Hill is minimum wage. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I bring that up is, the debate continues on. I live in Philadelphia. Pennsylvania right now is considering an increase to their minimum wage. This debate goes on and on. Obviously, the federal minimum wage is still at $7.25 an hour. And more than half of the states have increased minimum wage this past year alone. So it's a continuing debate, and I got to tell you, Dave, I'm not an academic like you. I go and I do my research and I find studies that say increasing the minimum wage means that employers are going to fire employees or not hire as many people. And then I can give you an equal number of studies that say, no, it has no impact at all on employment. It's a debate. And I don't know if there's any right or wrong answer. But again, this is a conversation just with you and based on your research and your thoughts. What are your thoughts on minimum wage?
Sure. Well, let's be clear. There's a level of the minimum wage where all economists agree it would be a bad thing, right? If we said the minimum wage is now $60 an hour, right, that would create mass unemployment.
Yes. That's actually
the minimum wages
angle, by the way. Keep going.
But the minimum wages we've seen in the United States over the last 40 years have been much, much more modest. And the wage increases that we've seen have been relatively small. The vast bulk of the reliable evidence suggests that those wage increases raise wages and have very limited effects on employment. Right. And right now, in the current labor market, the minimum wage is in many cases irrelevant because wages have risen so fast since the pandemic among low-wage workers that most of the wage increases we're seeing are not due to the minimum, and the minimum wage is not binding. Now, and it's important to emphasize, the federal minimum wage being $7.25 an hour, that's in nominal terms, right? And that was passed during the Obama administration. That $7.25 might have been a meaningful number, back in 2012. It's not a meaningful number now.
Well, wait, if I can interrupt you though, I mean, you do raise the point that hourly wages and, particularly for blue collar workers have increased significantly, since COVID. So isn't that an argument against minimum wage? Isn't that just like, hey, let the market take care of itself, because that's exactly what it's been doing?
Well, it's only been doing that last few years. Okay. And in fact, in the pre-pandemic years, almost all the wage increases at the bottom were coming from the minimum wage. Okay. And I think, we haven't, I know small business people will not be happy to hear me say this, but we don't have enough competition in low wage labor markets in the US. And so that absence of competition not only allows wages to be too low in some sense, but also gives firms more leeway than they should have. And you have unproductive firms paying low wages. You have more productive firms, next door that are paying higher wages. And you would say, oh, why? How can that even coexist? That can't coexist. That can't happen in my econ textbook. But the world is much more frictional than that. And so minimum wages actually tend to weed out less productive firms, reduce market power, and move workers towards the better ones up to a point, right? Okay. You can go too far. You can go overboard on this. We haven't seen much of that in the US because the minimum wage is so modest. It's much more aggressive in many other countries.
Do you think a minimum wage should be a national minimum wage, or do you, and again, your preference, do you think it's more of a local issue?
I think there should be both. I think there should be a federal minimum wage that sets a floor, and I think it should be indexed to inflation so we don't have this ridiculous, Agreed. Set it, then, Agreed. Down it goes. And then I think states, but it should not be as high as the highest state minimum wage. And then states should have discretion to raise it above. The wage structures really differ across states, right? The wage structure in Washington state is very different from the wage structure in Louisiana, and they shouldn't have the same minimum wage. And it would be destructive if Washington's minimum wage laws were imposed in Louisiana. But I think a federal minimum wage that, at this point it could be, $12 or $15 an hour, and indexed to inflation would be a very good floor.
One of the things that I hear from clients and people in my community, that business owners, is that, say the federal minimum wage did go up to, $12 to $15 an hour. And again, that would impact about half the states in the country. Doesn't that have an upward pressure on all wages? You got that person that's making, I don't know, $20 an hour when the minimum wage was $7.25 and now the minimum wage is $14. That person making $20 an hour is going to be like, hey, I should be getting a commensurate increase as well. And that's where a lot of business owners have an issue with it. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think?
Yeah, the minimum wages do spill upward over time. Yeah. Essentially, that it's like, hey, I used to I've been here 2 more years. I was making more than the person below me. Now they're making the same as me. Right. Don't I deserve something for that? And so, yeah, I think that's right. So, there are wage norms and expectations having to do with hierarchy, and you should be paid more than the person that you're supervising. So I think that's right. Okay. And again, you could go too far. But so there is no correct answer to this question, but the evidence about what the exact right level should be, but the evidence that we've seen says it has not, in the US, in the data of the last 40 years, we've really not seen minimum wage in episodes that have reduced employment. They have raised wages. Now, that doesn't mean it's good for employers, right? It cuts into profits. Often it also causes employers to raise prices of goods and services, so it gets passed through to customers. In general, the low wage workers are lower paid than the customers at the businesses they serve. So it's a form of redistribution. It's not free.
I found that's anecdotally, that is what I found as well. I don't see many of my clients going out of business because of an increase in minimum wage. I mean, you're running a business, you can do the math. So they're going to respond in some way, and it'll either be cutting overhead or increasing prices, or maybe, getting new technology to save time. But, in the end, it's not going to cut their employment per se. It's going to more have an impact on their profits, like you said.
Sure. I mean, again, if you said it's $60 an hour, it would.
Yeah.
But we haven't seen anything that looks like that.
Great example. All right. Final question, then I'll let you go. I wanted to talk about the workforce today, David. So, we went through the Great Resignation after COVID. that seems to have sort of leveled out a bit, right? I mean,
people are back.
People are back. And not only that, but there is, it's to me, I'm not an academic, so it's all anecdotal. It's based on my clients and the people that I interview and the people I see. Workers are more concerned about losing their jobs now than they were a couple of years ago. They see technology, they see the tech industry and other industries laying people off. They are more, I'm seeing less quiet quitters and coffee badging, than I saw, a year or 2 or 3 years ago. Is that, as a labor economist, is that perception, in your opinion, correct? Do you think that the markets are tightening now, even with such low unemployment, or do you think we're going to have an ongoing labor shortage that we've been experiencing?
So it depends where you're looking. So in the lower end of the labor market, people who are non-college educated doing services, right? Food service, cleaning, engineering, security, some manufacturing, remains wage pressure.
Right.
Labor markets are tight. Wages have risen a lot. They're not rising more. So I don't think it's the same kind of rate of change it was back in 2022. But they've stabilized at a higher level. And they've grown significantly more than inflation has.
Okay.
I think in the white collar sector, things are not as robustly tight. And we see firms rethinking about, do they need college graduates for all this? We certainly in the tech sector, right? There's a lot of, downsizing. Yeah. Now, whether that's AI, which firms like to claim, we're just getting new efficiencies, or it's whether they overhired during the pandemic, that's less clear. I think demographically, we're going to be in for a tight labor market for hands-on service jobs and young people for a long time to come, unless we dramatically change our immigration policies. So the U.S. labor market is in really good shape. Relative to other countries, we have very low unemployment, high labor force participation rates, the black-white gap in earnings at the lowest level in recorded U.S. data. Productivity growth is strong, and inflation is mostly under control. I mean, we have come out of the pandemic so much stronger than the countries to which we compare ourselves. It's really remarkable. Who gets to claim credit for all that? I don't know, but we're glad to be in that situation.
Dr. David Otter is a Ford Professor of Economics at MIT. He specializes in labor economics, macroeconomics, the political economy, and public economics. David, thank you. Great conversation. More questions to ask you. Maybe we'll get you back in the future. But I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for inviting me, Gene. This was a pleasure.
Everybody, you've been watching and listening to the Paychex THRIVE podcast. Again, if you'd like some advice or tips, help running your business, sign up for our Paychex THRIVE newsletter. It's paychex.com/thrive, paychex.com/thrive. My name is Gene Marks. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back again next week. Take care. Do you have a topic or a guest that you would like to hear on Thrive? Please let us know. Visit payx.me/Thrive topics and send us your ideas or matters of interest. Also, if your business is looking to simplify your HR, payroll, benefits, or insurance services, see how Paychex can help. Visit the resource hub at paychex.com/works. That's WORX. Paychex can help manage those complexities while you focus on all the ways you want your business to thrive. I'm your host, Gene Marks, and thanks for joining us. Till next time, take care.
This podcast is property of Paychex Incorporated 2024. All rights reserved.